Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Ajoe21love, here with Sports Only Topics, episode number 59 here on the podcast. Thank you for joining me today. If you're new to the podcast and you like this video, be sure to click those subscribe as well as the like button. If you like this video, if you want to see more um, sports only topics, as well as my pro wrestling reviews on the channel. But today on the podcast, I'll be talking about mostly NFL related news today. Got my trade camp, NFL power rankings, or Hall of Fame week, whichever you want to say. But I'll be going over those as well as my thoughts on Nick Chubb, Justin Houston, now with the Ravens, as well as A.J Mckee and his uh, outing versus Patricio Pitbull uh, on Saturday night. But for stars, I might as well get into it. Nick Chubb, first of all. So, Nick Chubb, he got an extension for the Browns. So, made sense. I think we all kind of saw it coming. Uh, him and Kareem Hunt, they currently have the best running back duo in the NFL. I would say, I think May would agree. So he gets a 3-year, $36.6 million deal, which keeps him and Hunt in the backfield for at least two more seasons together. Obviously, they're going to have to do an extension with Hunt eventually as well, but nonetheless, Nick Chubb, good for him, gets an extension. It rounds to about 12.2 million per year. So he's being paid between Dalvin Cook and Aaron Jones, which kind of seems right. Kind of seems right. I mean, everybody wants to be paid their amount of being paid as far as the market goes and how they feel they are as far as the NFL is concerned. So it's iffy, but it makes sense considering he's a top five back. Yes, he'll be paid sixth most as far as salary goes, but it's still a good contract for him as far as the Browns are concerned. So good for Nick Chubb. Uh, he getting paid. Justin Houston, now. Justin Houston, we know, former veteran of the Chiefs and spent the last two seasons, productive seasons, with the Colts. Now has a new home in Baltimore with the Baltimore Ravens. Now, this is a good pickup, I think, for Baltimore. I mean, Justin Houston continues to be credible, and he's been mentally healthy. And I mean, the last two seasons with the Colts, he had 11 sacks in 2019. Last year, he had 8 sacks. So clearly, he's still a viable threat as far as a pass rusher goes. And pairing him up with Calais Campbell, uh, Jalen Ferguson. Uh, yes, they lost Matt Judon to the Patriots, but they still got a good plethora of talent on the defense. side, and I didn't even talk about their defensive backfield as far as Marlon Humphrey, uh, etc. But yeah, it's a very good move. Marcus Peters as well. Uh, yeah, good move for Justin Houston. Apparently, he took less money to be with the Ravens than another team, so good for him. The Ravens are definitely up there as far as the contenders of the AFC. So, you know, good for Houston. Now, little pivot from that to UFC 265, which is Saturday, headlined by the interim heavyweight championship bout between Derek Lewis, the Black Beast, and Cyril Gain. Sorry if I mispronounced his name, but I seem to do that. So, very interesting bout. Definitely the biggest test, I would say, to Cyril Gain's young UFC career. He's 9-0. He has continued to impress in his wins. You know, he's beaten Rosenstrike. He's beaten Dos Santos. Last fight, he took the decision over Volkov. Now he fights the Black Beast, who I think it's safe to say will be the most powerful test of his career. Now, I've seen his fights in pieces, so I haven't really seen his chin get tested. Maybe he's been rocked once or a couple times, but as far as the opponents I just mentioned, this will definitely be the most powerful. And Derek Lewis has the most power as far as Gaines' previous opponents are concerned. So be a question to see how he will hold up to against the power of Derek Lewis. And Derek Lewis, haven't heard from him in a little while, but nonetheless, we know he's still out there. He last knocked out Curse Blades in devastating fashion. So now, from everyone's understanding, it seems that Francis Ngannou, there's nothing wrong with him, and Stipe is frustrated with the UFC while he's recuperating from that knockout from Francis Ngannou. But some say it doesn't make sense, some say it does. I mean, there's parts to it as to why an interim heavyweight title fight was made. Because the majority of UFC events or UFC pay per views are headlined by a top fight. That's just the way it's been the last decade or so. And they figure interim top fight, okay. So there we go. It'll be an interesting test, but I'm going with the Black Beast to get done. And hopefully, well, we also have to see about John Jones. He said he doesn't want to fight till next year, so that plays a part. So, see how things go. But I'm picking Black Beast to gain his first loss in the UFC. I would say first round knockout. That's just the way I feel. But yeah. Then we go pivoting from that to now you to Bellator. So some interesting news for Bellator. So first off, so A.J Mckee, still undefeated, went up against Pitbull on Saturday night in an interesting bout for the Bellator featherweight title, in which McKee made it look like easy pickings in some ways, choking out Pitbull in less than 2 minutes. I mean, one statement uh, for McKee, and he keeps his undefeated streak alive. 18-0 inside for his MMA career, and geez, you know, McKee, he wants to try to go for double strap, go to lightweight, try and make it happen. I mean, we'll see, but what a statement for McKee, I would say. Because Pitbull, we know, is no joke. He is a multiple time champion. So, yeah, not much to say. And then we also know the dates of Bellator's semifinals for the Grand Prix, for their light heavyweight Grand Prix. So, on October 16th, it will be Vadim Nemkov versus Anthony Rumble Johnson, who looked very stout in his first bout in, I believe, 4.5 years. And then on the other side of things, we got Corey Anderson versus Ryan Bader. Another interesting test. We both know Corey Anderson, this is definitely going to be his biggest test. And we know how Ryan Bader, of course, the former Bellator light heavyweight champion. Question is, how much I think will he be motivated? Because we know with heavyweight now, with light heavyweight, it's going to be the judge to see for Corey Anderson, can you rise up and ultimately get past Bader and be in the finals for the belt light heavyweight Grand Prix. We'll see, but that is two very interesting fights made for October 16th. Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz. Ay, ay, ay. So, the news broke out today. I mean, the other day, there was news that he was not going to practice for training camp due to a foot injury. And when I see stuff in training camp that's not huge or something as far as OTAs, I I like just wait, but I keep an eye on it. So then the news broke out today that Carson Wentz will undergo surgery on his foot and will miss 5 to 12 weeks. So based on that, that's anywhere in between over a month to 3 months of miss action. So he's obviously gonna miss pre preseason, and based on the timetable, there is speculation and hopeful that he can return for the start of the season. But if he can't, then it puts the Colts in a bind for the start of the season because they have a rough stretch for the start of the season with the Ravens, the Titans, the Dolphins. I mean, so they signed Brett Hundley the other day, I assume for depth on the roster because they were preparing for something. So currently on the roster, as far as QBs are concerned, they have Eason, who they drafted last year. They have it was either last year or the year before, I forgot, but relatively young quarterback Neeson, they drafted out of Washington. They got Sam Ellinger, who they drafted this year in the later round. And of course, they got Hundley. So, very interesting to see how they go about this because they have a very interesting stretch to start season. And, I mean, ever since Andrew Luck retired 2 years ago, their stance for trying to find a quarterback has been very much up in the air. I mean, because in 2019, when Luck retired, Jacoby Brissett, he started the majority of the season and he did well. But ultimately, they went 7-9, and after he got injured, they weren't the same. Last year, they got Philip Rivers, and they did a really good job. And Rivers had one of his better years behind that wall in Indianapolis. And they went 11-5. They gave the Bills all they could handle in the playoffs and ultimately fell short. Now this year, they get Carson Wentz from the Eagles. It's like, okay, reuniting with Frank Reich, you know, they can really be a buzz in the AFC if we get the Carson Wentz prior to last season. And now this injury, we're more going to have to wait. Now, again, the timetable, it's so possible that he makes out for the start of the season, but it's it's a question. Uh, it's going to be seeing how he progresses, how he treats his surgery, how he does his rehab. We'll see. It's unfortunate because if you're a fan of Carson Wentz and you realize with how things went down last year, it was unfortunate, and looking to see him rebound for this season. I mean, we'll see. But I mean, with the Julio Jones to the Titans news, that made me pinpoint the Titans to be the favorites in the South. And this injury, I mean, if you're a Titans fan, you gotta be thrilled assuming. Same with Jacksonville, because you're gonna have to face the Colts twice a year as well. So now they're still a really good team all around. So I mean, they still have the line. They still have pieces at wide receiver. They still have a good committee at running back. They drafted Quiddy Pay. They have DeForest Buckner, Darius Leonard. Uh, they have a good team, but it's just unfortunate for Carson Wentz and the Colts. Now getting into it, so Thursday is a Hall of Fame game, getting closer and closer to football season. It's almost here. You know, Saturday and Sunday, the Hall of Fame inductees of last year and this year will be enshrined to the Hall of Fame. And so, with that, here comes my first NFL power rankings for this season. Now, I did make a post draft or a pre draft power rankings a couple months ago, but that was mostly progression. I realized after looking at the rankings, this time I took a longer and harder look at trying to piece together the proper power rankings. These are my power rankings again, subject change. But this is how I see all the teams in order for the 2021 NFL season currently. So, for at number one, Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, no reason to argue. They brought back all their starters, etc. They brought everybody back. Uh, Not much to say. To the Chiefs again. I mean, especially with who they brought in on the O line: Joe Thuney, Orlando Brown, Austin Blythe, Kyle Long, who unfortunately suffered an injury, but still, they brought back a lot on their O line. So now some may put them at number one because of those O line additions, but nonetheless, I have them at number two. Number three, now with Aaron Rodgers, the news he of his negotiated contract, he will be there for 2021 this season, as far as we know. So after all the rumblings on draft night, so I had them bumped up to number 3. Next up, following number 4, the Bills. I mean, Josh Allen, that defense played well last season. Stephon Diggs, Cole Beasley. The only question is, can Devin Singletary and Zach Moss be more of a build for the Bills offense this season? Next up, number 5, Cleveland Browns. Same spot. I mean, it's crazy that I have the Browns as a top 5 team, but go up and down that roster, it's hard to find a big wrinkle. Baker Mayfield, his 4th year, his 2nd year in the system. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, they have the best O line in the league. OBJ coming back, Jarvis Landry, Rashard Higgins, etc. And on the defensive side, I mean, Myles Garrett, Clowney, they drafted Greg Newsome, Greedy Williams, Denzel Ward. Can go on and on, but yeah. Next up at 6. Now, I moved them down because that Cam Akers injury, it's a little worrisome, but not too much. The Los Angeles Rams, I mean, they were the best defense in football last season. And Jared Goff, yeah, he was okay for them. He helped lead them to the playoffs and the Super Bowl. But Matthew Stafford, we all know, is an upgrade over Jared Goff. And this is the real test, again, to see if Matt Stafford can really shine and prove people otherwise. Next up at 7. Now, I believe last time they had them at number 9, but after going through it all and the roster, I got Seattle Seahawks. Russell Wilson, they did make some few additions on their own line, which, if they can all stay healthy, Russell Wilson, I mean, we all know they let him cook for a little bit last season and then they fell. The reality is they need to be more balanced. They need to be healthy. Jamal Adams, they need to fix that up, as well as Dwayne Brown. But they are still one of the best teams in the league. Part of that is Russell Wilson. Next up at 8, I got the Tennessee Titans. And now I moved them up as well because the Julio Jones trade, I mean, that cannot be understated. A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, 1, 2, for Ryan Tannehill, 3rd year in Tennessee, along with Derrick Henry. And I think people forget that they went 11-5 last year with a terrible defense. A terrible defense that was. And with Stephen Gostkowski missing numerous kicks last season. So now hopefully with a more stable kicker and they got Bud Dupree, they got Caleb Farley, Janoris Jenkins to help out that defense. I mean, it can only go up from what it was last year. Next up at 9, the Saints. You know, people. Now, I will say that Drew Brees regressed last season, but he still pushed the pail, and part of that is they had a really good team. And now that Brees retired, yes, unfortunately, he couldn't get that proper end to his career, but nonetheless, they still have a well balanced team still, despite them purging a bunch of their team due to salary cap issues. But you still look up and down that roster, they still have Alvin Kamara, they still have Michael Thomas, who he will miss part of the season probably, but he will be healthy again. Okay, you got Adam Trotman, who I'm sure will be better in his second year. You still got the O line, etc., etc. Ryan Ramczyk. You still got, Cameron Jordan, Marshawn Lattimore. I mean, Malcolm Jenkins. You look up and down that roster, and they still got a bunch of credible pieces. So then at 10, Baltimore. Now, yes, I just talked about Baltimore, and I was harsh on them uh, last power rankings, but then looking more through it, I mean, yes, 10 may seem low to some people, but the reality is they got that very good talent on defense, and their offense credit is really good, and Lamar Jackson is really good, but it's also their number one question. We tend to forget. I mean, plus, besides Lamar Jackson and Mark Andrews, they got a bunch of young, and Sammy Watkins. They got a bunch of young, really inexperienced on that offense. Marquise Brown, another year in the system. Rashad Bateman, how will he do in his rookie year? Uh, just we'll see how it goes. But I got him at number 10. Another team I was harsh on, but once again, looking at their roster, getting a second look, because for these power rankings, I sat down and took a harder look at these teams. And number 11, Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, yes, they went 11-0 and they fell short, but the last stretch of the season. But looking at their additions, Pat Freiermuth and Najee Harris in the draft, you know, they got rid, they reshuffled their whole line. So, and they still have a bunch of talent on their defense. It's still one of the better defenses. It's just a question of like last year. Can they be more balanced on the offense? Because we saw Big Ben, he can still throw it, but they need balance in on that offense in order for it to get farther than it did last year. Next up at 12, the Colts. I mentioned earlier, even with or without Carson Wentz, this is right about the right placement for them, because as I mentioned, they have a good team, especially on offense, the line, etc. Next up, the 49ers at 13. Another big jump from last power rankings, but the reality is health got the better of them last season. And this season, you know, Bosa come back, Armstead still there. They lost Hyder, who filled in well for them when with all the injuries. They gave Fred Warner his well-deserved extension. You know, obviously the biggest question for them is health because we know how talented they are with Kittle and Samuel Ayuk. He did well last year, his rookie year. We'll see because the biggest question, obviously, for them is their secondary as well as the turn to D'Amico Ryans from Robert Sala at defense coordinator. How will his game either help or hinder the 49ers defense? Because there's obviously going to be a drop off. Question is how much of their defense. So there's at 14, I got the Patriots. I mean, their off season blew me away. As a Patriot fan, blew me away. You know, and always going back to last season. We were 7-9, and some people were talking about it's like we were 3-14 or 3-13. But with Hightower coming back, yes, Chung retired, but Duggar, he now takes his number 23. I assume he'll have a bigger role. McCourty, etc. Uh, Gilmore and J.C. Jackson are both still there, so that's plus. Whether it's Cam Newton or Mac Jones, I just think that 9-8 or 10-7 is not that far off to look at as far as the talent on this team is concerned. And you could even look at the talent on this team and say 14 is low. But to be fair and adamant with the rankings, I'm going with 14. Then we got 15, the Los Angeles Chargers. Now, with the previous rankings, I had them in the top 10. And yes, we all saw what Justin Herbert did last season, but the reality is they were 7-9. And so, despite that, and they brought in the reinforcements on the O line. They brought in Jared Cook, which will help. You know, it's just a question, but as far as the rankings go, compared to how they were last season, 15, yes, it may be low to many, but that's the reality. They went 7-9 last season. So now, just talking off that, it may be a question mark as to why the Dolphins are at 16. But, you know, the reality is they went 10-6 and they still have very good talent on defense. Now, Xavier Howard requested a trade. I mean, he was the leader in interceptions last season with 10. So their defense is so really good talent. It's just so and so. And the question for the Dolphins this season is obviously Tua. Because they mostly have young talent on that offense. You know, with Tua, Preston Williams, Devontae Parker. So, well, he's a veteran. Gesicki, Salvin Ahmed, etc. Next up at 17, the Chicago Bears. Now, Chicago Bears, yes, they made the playoffs, and judging for it, I had four playoff teams, or four non-playoff teams in between the Colts and the Bears, but you can't discount that they fell apart last season in the middle down the stretch, and now with the draft and Justin Fields and the progression of David Montgomery, you know, it's a question. But them ultimately making the playoffs is why I had them above the next team. Number 18, the Cardinals, the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this is a big year for the Cardinals, I think, in the fact that last year they went 8-8, and there were times when it looked like they were going to be a playoff team, but ultimately fell short. Now, Kyler Murray, I expect him to take the next step. You know, they lost Kenyon Drake to the Raiders, but still having Chase Edmonds and James Conner shouldn't be too big of a drop off as far as production. You know, obviously their signings of J.J. Watt, Rodney Hudson, you know, A.J. Green, they're exciting, but they ultimately have to put in the work. Is ultimately next up at 19, Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota Vikings at 19. Now, it's a bit of a head scratcher for me to have them at 19 because, you know, last year was down 7-9, but ultimately, when you look at the team, you know, they're stable in offense. You know, Jeff Jefferson, he had a great rookie year. Thielen, Cook, Cousins, assuming he comes back healthy from being a high trace contact COVID and Calvin Mod. But their defense, it's just now obviously last year there were injuries and Daniel Hunter looks back healthy, but they're not particularly impressive as far as a certain category is concerned. I mean, they're good. They were statistically a top five offense, but they're not great as far as an aspect is concerned. Now, next year, they have good pieces, so we'll see. Now, the lowest playoff team I had for these power rankings are number 20, Washington football team. Now, yes, I had them barely outside the top 10, but ultimately they went 7-9. So, and I love their defense. They're young, they're gritty. They have the right coach, Ron Rivera. Their offense is the question, though. And, they have good pieces all around. They have that whole line. They have good young wide receivers, Curtis Samuel, Adam Humphries, Antonio Gibson, Terry McLaurin. But the question is the quarterback and how productive they'll get from that aspect. Same with the following team, the New York Giants, number 21. Um, Ultimately, the question will be Daniel Jones. I think we can all agree. Because we know all the talent the Giants have. It's just a question. Now, Raiders fans, I mean no disrespect. At 22, I got the Raiders. I think ultimately you can understand as to why I got the Raiders at 22. They were at 8-8, but they sliced through that O line so much that it's going to be a question. And they were competitive, obviously, we know, but that defense has underperformed. So, yeah, not sure what to say. Panthers, again at 23. I might as well just uh, show you the power rankings I here, just so you know that I'm not kidding. But yeah, there it is. So 23, the Panthers ultimately rides on Sam Darnold. I hope he does well. I hope he turns the corner. But for now, 23. Cowboys at 24. It's not a stretch. 24 seemed like a good spot for the Cowboys. I know Dak is back. I know Zeke. I know Cooper. I know the receivers. I know that they got the line. But we can say all we want. The reality is we have to look into the production. And we didn't see much from the Cowboys last season. And the year before they went 8-8. And we'll see. We'll see. 25 the Falcons. I know in my playoff prediction I had them as a playoff team or a borderline playoff team, but that defense has got to get better. That defense, point blank. I mean, there's not much more to say. Obviously, Matt Ryan, we love them. Kyle Pitts, they drafted Calvin Ridley. Hopefully, he has a better year now with Julio Jones. We'll see. 26, the Broncos, now without Aaron Rodgers, definitely is not coming this year. Safe say. Drew Lock or Teddy Bridgewater is the question. Can Drew Lock appease expectations now? We'll see. 27, the Bengals. I like what I've been seeing from Joe Burrow from training camp, and they should be a fun watch this season, but I need to see more protection for the defense to be better. And if they're going to have a chance, their defense has to find ways to make some stops in a competitive division because they can be explosive on offense, but their defense has to do something. 28, Jaguars. I mean, I think this is fair for how much we like Trevor Lawrence, but there's going to be a learning curve with him and Urban Meyer, and that's fair. So, 29, the Eagles. I mean, I had them lower, obviously, in the earlier rankings, but like the 49ers, they were very much hindered by injury last season, and they can get healthier because the offense has some talent with the O line, and they drafted Devontae Smith and Rieger. He can go back. I mean, Nick Sirianni, I have questions about as a coach already, but we'll see. Next 30, Robert Sala and the Jets. Zach Wilson's finally signed to his rookie contract. I mean, they have some nice talent on the offense side. Now, like with the Jaguars, there's going to be a learning curve, but I, if it wasn't for Robert Sala, I'd probably have him lower. I think it's safe to say. 31, Lions, Jared Goff, hope he's better. I like T.J. Hawkinson. We'll see. 32, Texans, worst team in the league. Not much to say. All right, so there was my training camp, Hall of Fame week, power rankings coming into the season. So obviously that's right now, but things will change obviously in the season. But that's the episode for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Um, if you did, click that like button as well as subscribe to see more. Thank you. Uh, I'll be back obviously Thursday with your AEW Dynamite review. So thank you. Of course, next week for as far as pro wrestling fans are concerned, that or excuse me, as far as the week of the 13th, um, I'll be hitting up with 3 videos weekly as a new schedule with sorts of the topics, AEW Dynamite review, as well as AEW Rampage review. So, but nonetheless, that's the changed schedule to expect in a couple weeks. So, thank you. Be safe and peace.